Yo guys, what is going on? Blossom is back and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives and another episode of underrated, rightly rated, overrated, or severely overrated. We are now reaching the upper echelon of RQ as we breach the RQ90 ranges, and today's episode we're going to be talking about RQ90 and 91. Now, if there's a little bit of like stutter in my speak, it's because I have an ulcer on my tongue, and it doesn't feel too good when I talk too much with an ulcer on my tongue, but obviously we must produce the content. So let us begin. And for a starting point, I want to talk about these four-wheel drive cars. They're all RQ91, but they're all unfairly balanced in my opinion. So you have the M8, you have the NSX, the 911 Turbo, and the 911 Turbo 3.8. And clearly, some cars are better than the other. For example, the M8 competition is 3189, the NSX is 3190, the Porsche 911 Turbo is 2989, and the Porsche 911 Turbo 3.8 is 2988. So the thing is, the 911 Turbo is a slightly better version of the Cabriolet, and the NSX is a slightly better version of the M8. One is just better in handling, one is just better in 0 to 60. I don't know why four of them in comparison together. So the thing that I want to talk about and to start off today's video with are going to be the four-wheel drive cars, and I put all these four cars for our starting points together. And as you can see, the NSX as well as the 911 Turbo, the one that's not from Enter the Black Forest or World Expo, I think it's World Expo, are the best cars here. The 911 Turbo is the best car for slalom and twisty, whereas the NSX is the best car for the car park and type, the G-Force. Now, at least the Cabriolet has Canyon Tour, which is very quirky. But for the most part, it's just weird to see that cars like the BMW M8 competition is even in comparison. Like, why is it even 91? So the M8 competition is just a really good example of a car that is, in my opinion, overrated. It doesn't deserve to be with its competition. Same thing with the 911 Turbo Cabriolet. I think it's overrated. I think both of these would be better at 90, whereas the 911 Turbo and the Honda NSX can stay. Now, I know I'm not showing all the times here. I've censored some of them because when I show you the rest of these times, then less of these greens will become, well, green. So first of all, I'm going to put in the Oxia. Now, the Oxia is a very terrible showing, to be fair. It's a really good dragster, and it's a specialist in that sense. And right now, it takes a lot of greens in the drag section, but that's going to change when I put in other cars as well. One thing to take note of as well is I believe that the GTR, the track edition has a very strong showing, because if I take away the 911 Turbo, the BMW competition doesn't even take the best times with the 911 Turbo out of the photo. It actually goes to the GTR track edition. So the track edition definitely is a very strong 90 for it to be still basically sharing the table with a lot of these 91s. So the GTR is a strong car in my opinion. Now the track edition, there are a lot of GTRs. So moving on, I'm going to put the 911 back in play, and now I want to add the other cars. Next one is the Porsche Turbo 3.8, and the Turbo 3.8 is very, very disappointing. For a 91, it fails to beat many of its competition. It fails to beat the 911 Turbo, the NSX. Even if I took these two cars away, I would be surprised. Yeah, look at that. The 3.8 still isn't the best car in any situation. Actually, the GTR track edition is. So yeah, the 911 3.8 definitely is not a overrated car or a rightly rated car. I do believe that Porsche is severely overrated. And I guess we want to talk about the track edition as well. I think the track edition is underrated, and I feel like that car could actually go up to a 91, and that is really impressive for me to say that, because for the most part when it comes to four-wheel drive cars, I tend to not think that they are underrated. Most four-wheel drive cars are, in my opinion, overrated if not rightly rated. So that is a huge feat for the track edition to actually be hitting above its weight under the eyes of Hutch RQ balancing. It's very, very special. Now, I want to just continue talking about the four-wheel drive. We're going to finish it off adding in the Lamborghini. So we'll put the Porsche back in, we'll put the NSX back in, and now put the Lamborghinis in as well. So we have the Gallardo and the Gallardo Superleggera. Now, these two Lambos I put out for a reason, because they're actually semi-competent. So the Gallardo LP570 Superleggera is pretty decent. It actually is the best car for the G-Force and slalom among all four-wheel drive performance performance tire cars, and it kind of holds its own weight against the car park as well as the indoor karting. The Gallardo LP570-4 Super Trofeo, however, isn't the best car in any regard, but it seems to be relatively decent across the board on the twisty track sets. You get to the fast circuit and the car kind of just tears apart. But it has decent times in the slalom, the G-force, and the car park, which is, you know, relatively impressive. I mean, it actually has better times than the Porsche 911 Turbo on the G-force as well as on the car park. So that being said, I think that these two Lamborghinis do deserve to be rightly rated. So as much as I crap on the Lamborghinis, these two are actually pretty decent because they have, you know, they're relatively lightweight, they handle well, and I think there is one thing that you can really tell on the rightly rated four-wheel drive cars. They all handle pretty well, like 90 plus. If not, then it will be cars like the 911 Turbo and the Track Edition, which just have, you know, standout 0 to 60. So I think that this is the level of what a 91 four-wheel drive performance tire car should be. So the last thing that I do want to talk about in this comparison, obviously, is going to be the Lancia ECV. Yeah, right now, as you can see, everything is relatively competitive. Now, the two cars that I do want to mention here are the two 92s that I decided to put in. That's the Audi V10 Plus and the Turbo Florio. And you can bet your ass in the next episode, these two cars are immediately going down to severely underrated, especially the Audi. The thing is, we're comparing this Audi to basically a bunch of cars that are younger or cheaper in RQ, and it is so terrible. It is incredibly terrible. Even on the drags, it isn't even the best car here. That's where the Peugeot Oxia shines. It's on that drag narrative. But then again, we do put in the ECV, and the ECV kind of just wins everything. I mean, including the quarter mile, for crying out loud, and including the 0 to 100 and the 0 to 120. So yeah, the ECV definitely, there was a time when this car was like RQ83 or some crap like that. It's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. At 91, I still think it's way too good, and I think that this really shows it off. Yes, I get it doesn't have performance tires, it has slick tires, but at the end of the day, like, I don't think it's fair to judge a car's RQ based off its versatile performance, because you're not really racing a car in terms of versatile performance. You're racing a car on a definitive track set. If you know what, if you get what I mean. Like, these RQs for four-wheel drive cars, they get their RQs because you realize, oh, they can be used on the wet and the dry. But when it comes down to an actual race, there isn't anything as a wet and a dry. There's no mixed asphalt to what I can recall. There's no half rain, half dry track set where these cars would make a difference in. You know what I mean? So yeah, if it's either all wet or it's all dry, and if it's all wet, you want standard tires. If it's all dry, then you're going to use the Lancia ECV. And I think that's the main issue with the four-wheel drive performance tire cars. So yeah, dude, the ECV is ridiculously strong, so that is definitely going to be underrated. The Oxia is a very interesting case because it's a specialist car. It is terrible, 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 terrible on the twisties, but it's so damn good on the fast. I'm going to keep it in rightly rated because it knows what it wants to be, and it excels at where it wants to be good at. So rightly rated. Now, the next things that I want to talk about are going to be the four-wheel drive RQ90s, because for the most part, we were looking at the 91s. And when it comes to the 90s, as I've already mentioned, the Track Edition is the best car there. Some relatively decent cars would be the Huracan Spider, and that's about it. Maybe. I really don't want to admit this, but the Jaguar XE Project 8 is the second best car here for the Twisty, which is very, very depressing, because that would probably mean that I would have to put the Jaguar Project 8 and rightly rates it as an RQ90, but then again, like, it is such a bad fall off. It is the absolute worst car here on the drags. It is the worst quarter mile car. It is the worst half mile car. It is the worst 1 mile car. And it isn't even the best RQ90 on show. Now, that is given that I do think that the Track Edition is overrated. I mean, underrated. You take that away, and yeah, the Project 8 is better. It's the best twisty car here. It's not saying much though, because you are comparing the Project 8 to a bunch of freaking Lamborghinis and Audis. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. But then again, if I were to put in the GTR back and I were to put in the Quasar would be the best one, and the Quasar is cheaper than everything else. But I've already said in the last episode of this series, the Quasar is severely underrated. That thing is a beast. And as you can see over here, I state my case. It's so freaking strong. So if anything, the Quasar should go up with the GTR. You know what? I can't. I hate the Project 8. I'm never gonna give it the respect that it will ever deserve. I'm putting it in overrated. I do not care. It is just so terrible on the dregs. I don't care. Some people might argue it might be a 90. I'm never going to steep as low as to agreeing with that. Other cars that are really bad, the Honor, as you saw, was really irrelevant in that comparison. If anything, I actually think it's severely overrated. 88, please. Why is it 90? It doesn't make any sense. Audi R8 GT, severely overrated. All of these Audis really are just very, very sad. This is also overrated. This is, I would say, slightly, just ever so slightly overrated. It's not the worst thing in the world. This V10 Plus. Why do I keep getting notifications on my watch? Okay, anyway, that was distracting me for a little bit. But yeah, these two Audis are overrated in my opinion. And where were the rest of the four-wheel drives? I wish I didn't close that. Oh yes, and obviously the Gallardo over here. This one's overrated because in that comparison, only these two Lamborghinis were the shining lights. This one was not. So that's going to be overrated as well. And oh yes, the Reventon and the Super Veloce. These two are severely overrated. Once again, in that comparison, truly all the limelight was literally down to the Track Edition, the Project 8, and of course the Quasar when I put it in. Did anybody even realize the Honor R8 GT, Reventon, and Super Veloce? No, because all of them had their, colors in dark red. They didn't have any standout times. They were absolutely horrendous. They're all severely overrated. Those cars are absolutely garbage. I mean, truly though, as you can see here, handling does play a part, because if you have 90 handling, then for the most part you are rightly rated. The only car that kind of stands out is the Gallardo with 90 handling, but the 0 to 60 is absolutely atrocious for an RQ91, and it only has slightly better MRA than the rest of its competition, which isn't enough to boost it up in terms of value. And there we go. We should be done with the four-wheel drives now. Well, this is a four-wheel drive. Oh yeah, the Panamera. I mean, this one I think is just slightly overrated. I still feel like that Panamera and the Taycan should switch, and that should be it. Like, this should maybe be 89 and the Taycan also be 89, or the Taycan be 90 maybe. So yeah, I'm gonna put that in overrated. One thing that I didn't even bother to even think about was the El Rouge. Did I even put the El Rouge in the comparison? I cannot remember, but again, I've already closed the tab, so I'm just gonna put it in severely overrated, because for the most part, the El Rouge kind of serves a very similar purpose to the Gallardo, where the MRA is good, but the 0 to 60 is kind of like outlyingly bad. The handling is terrible, but then we also need to remember the El Rouge's medium ground clearance. But then again, it isn't going to beat an Evo 8 on the City Streets medium, which is the only reason why you would value medium ground clearance in a car like that. So I think it's severely overrated for sure. Okay, now we're down to four-wheel drives that are performance tires or slick tires. Now I want to move on to rear wheel drive. Now the first thing that we want to talk about are going to be the RQ91s for the most part. And as you can see for the RQ91s, it's actually balanced. Cars like the Ginetta and the GT1 and the Huayra, the 956, they're all relatively balanced, and they're all very strong within each other. I think the only outliers here is that the Pagani Huayra Roadster is kind of crap on the slalom. The Ginetta Super Cup is kind of crap on the Heaven Road. Like, for the most part, like, it's bright greens. I know that the R390 doesn't win anything, but at least it's like consistent, and it's consistently decent as well. When we move on to the drags, it's a different story. Cars like the Ginetta really falter, the Huayra really falters as well. This is where the Sabera really comes into play. So if we were to take the TVR out, then the best car would actually be the McLaren, and we'll talk about the McLaren later. So if we take the McLaren out, then the best car is the 720 Spider. If we take the 720 Spider out, finally, then we have the 675 LT. Wow. So these cars out here, 956, the Huayra, R390, they're not that good of dragsters, but at least they are very good twisted cars, and the TVR kind of is the car to choose for. I think the really disappointing cars when it comes to rear wheel drive performance tires would be the Viper. I don't know why. The Viper was 87, it went up to 89. It doesn't make any sense. It's so far out of its depth. The Zonda is pretty terrible as well, and the McLaren 675 LT is also pretty terrible. We did see it glow as a dragster, but then again, it was a fourth choice dragster after I alienated 3 cars from this comparison. Moving on to RQ90, I think the biggest loser from the RQ90 section is going to be the 12C GT3, but I'll talk about that a little bit more later. Right now, we want to highlight the 91s, and for sure, the ones that are, I would say, the worst, the weakest performers would be the 675, the Zonda, and the Viper SRT10. Everything else is relatively competitive, so I'm going to close that down. Hopefully I don't regret that, and let's put in our verdict. So I don't think any car here is actually overrated. I just think that these 91s are rightly rated. The Viper is severely overrated. The Nissan's in a good spot, I believe. The Huayra's in a good spot. The Zonda 760 RS is overrated. I don't think it's severely overrated. Only the Viper is in a very, very, very bad spot in my opinion. The 675 is overrated in my opinion, and I think the rest of the cars that we are to talk about are going to be oh yeah, the Huracan Spider. I totally forgot about that car. This car's actually decent, and I'm going to put it in rightly rated, because I think the main thing about it is that for an RQ90, the MRI is really strong, and it wasn't a weak performer by any means. Now let's move on to the RQ90s, shall we? So what we're going to talk about here now are going to be the best performers are going to be, as you saw, the 720, which I think is actually underrated. The GT2 is alright. There was a time where the GT2 was RQ93 and one of the strongest cars in the game, but then again, I think the biggest thing that the GT2 falters from is that the MRI isn't really good, 85. The short tail is a really good twisty car. As you can see, it's the best car for car parking, G-force, indoor karting, and karting circuit. If I were to take this car away, then as you can see, it actually gets a lot more competitive with these prize cars over here. The 720S takes a lot of the names, and even the Apollo and Rage and the 936 are, all right. Again, the Viper, just not good enough. The 675, again, I'm putting it down here compared with RQ90s, and it's still failing to really get a lot of good times. Even the best dragster is actually the 720S, and that's 1 RQ cheaper. So the 675 definitely isn't in the right place. Zonda isn't in the right place. Viper definitely isn't in the right place at all. It should not be a 90 plus car. And then some other cars which are relatively disappointing in terms of performance is the 12C GT3, as well as the 720S Spider. A lot of these cars are not getting a lot of good times. Another thing that was kind of surprising was the Apollo Enrage. The Apollos are known for being really strong dragsters of good MRA, but the Enrage is very disappointing across the board. Again, it doesn't really win much in terms of twisty. It doesn't win anything in terms of drag, but it is the best car for the karting circuit, where else the 936 is the best car for the slalom. Does that make them good enough to be RQ90s though? To be really good at one track set and be horrible at everything else? I don't think so. So therefore, my final verdict for cars that are overrated, I do think that the Enrage is slightly overrated. It'll be better as an 89. The 12C GT3 is severely overrated. The Apollo N seems decent. I mean, I'm looking back at the times of the Apollo N, and there's nothing that is a standout. Like, it's not good, it's not bad. It seems to be okay. So I'm gonna put it in rightly rated. Obviously, the 720S is underrated. This thing is really, really strong, and I don't know why it's a 90. It definitely should be higher than that. The 911 GT2 kind of carries its weight. I think it's completely okay where it is. The TVR as well, I think it's in a good place now as a 91. It used to be 86/87. Now I think it's good. Very similar to the Oxia. These two cars are very similar, as in they are just, dragster specialists. Why can't I put them together? I want to put them together. There you go. So these two are very, very special. It's just that one's a rear-wheel drive version and one's a four-wheel drive version. If not, then they kind of just cover their own certain areas. I think the 956 is in a decent place. Nothing too bad to say about that car. And then obviously we have the short tail. Now I think the short tail is a little bit underrated. I think it could pass as a 91, and I think the main reason for that is because if I were to take away the short tail from the 90 comparison, it gets a lot more competitive. As you can see, like the bright greens are spread throughout across the board. If I put the short tail in, yeah, it gets a little bit less competitive because it seems to be first place in a lot of races. So if I do take that away, away, then everything else becomes a lot more competitive. So I think that the short tail should go up to 91. I think that isn't too bad. The Janetta is okay as well. I think it's kind of treading water. One interesting thing about the 720S though is that it is very bad in the twisties, which is kind of funny, I would say. Like it's uncharacteristically bad. Like it's really bad. Like the slalom and the undercutting and the G-force time is horrible. And this is a car with 95 handling, you know what I mean? Like it's funny, but it is a very strong dragster. I think it can go up to a 91. It definitely shouldn't be lower rated to the 675. If anything, these two should switch, the 675 being the 90 and the 720S being the 91, in my personal opinion. 720S Spider is a little bit overrated in my opinion. I think it's an 89. It would be slightly better. The Janetta is in a good spot. I think that is in the right place. Another thing that we need to take into account is that, you know, when it comes to rear-wheel drive performance cars, you put the McLaren and the Porsche together. The Porsche is just by right the better car, better handling, lower 0 to 60, and the MRA difference is very small. Not enough where this should be up here. And then obviously the 911 GT1 Evo, that is going to be rightly rated in my opinion, and the 936 is in my opinion slightly, just ever so slightly overrated. I do really like the car, don't get me wrong, but the numbers don't lie. I think it's just better as an 89, and it'll be really good as an 88. I think 89 would be nice. And then ending off are just the off-road tires and all-service tire cars. You can't go wrong with four-wheel drive off-road tires. I think both of these cars are underrated. They can definitely go up in RQ if they wanted to, but then again, those cars are their own benchmarks. Whatever RQ they are, I'll be okay with it because they are ridiculously strong. As long as they're both under the Escudo Pikes Peak, then we'll have no issues. And then next up, and there was a time where the Escudo Pikes Peak was actually below these two cars, and that's just terrible. And last but not least is the Cayenne Turbo. And in my opinion, the Cayenne Turbo is not that bad. I'm gonna give it rightly rated, and the other Cayenne that's 92 in my opinion is overrated. It should bump down to 91. But anyway guys, that's gonna be it for today. I gotta say this was a very interesting video. I learned a lot here because usually I'm really quick at going at flaming the Lamborghinis, but some of these Gallardos, I wouldn't say that they're good, but they are competitive within their competition. I mean, they're competitive within their RQ neighborhood, and that's why I'm gonna give it the rightly rated tag. But then again, there are some Lamborghinis where you should watch out for, like the Raventon and the Murcielago, that truly are terrible. I think rule of thumb is that if you are a Murcielago, you are terrible in the game. I love them in real life. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day, man. Stay safe, wash your hands. I'm Blossom out. Peace.
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville
Atlantic.